Hello everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to another hold on, stop, bad computer. I forgot I had Twitch open on my first window. Welcome to our first live stream of sorts. We're going to be analyzing and discussing our own creative works. Give me one moment trying to pull up my stream on my phone. In case someone says something, I'll actually be able to see someone's messages. Just kind of give me issues right now. So I guess something I will say is does kind of have a little bit of a disclaimer attached to it. I don't know why my freaking... There you go. Finally pulled up. There is going to be a little bit of disclaimer to this. This does have publication warning. So I am the author. I am the one who wrote it. Great English. I'm the one who wrote this project. So I'm pretty much the only one that is actually able to publish, to create a video and publish this video, analyzing and showing off my creative work. My name is Zachary Bennett. I am the author of this piece. I literally spent 2 years of grad school developing this project. I know this story like the back of my hand. So I'm giving myself express permission to analyze and discuss this project. That being said, this is going to be a multi-part series. Basically, I'm going to be focusing entirely on getting through and analyzing the critical introduction for this first stream. The next couple streams will be analyzing the actual written work, the writing samples. If there's something I will say is if you are a fan of Supernatural, if you're a fan of the occult, if you are a fan of the concept of heaven and hell, of demons and angels, you may very well like this book. This story is partially inspired by the series One Piece by Eiichiro Oda, and you will actually see why the stories that series kind of influenced my writing within this very video, the stream. I'm also going to show off this dedication here. I'm not going to read it out loud, but basically I was dedicating this project to my late grandmother, Mary Lou Bennett, who wrote the book Murder in Oregon, Murder Once Done, and was nominated for the Edgar Award. She was essentially the person that I was looking up to the most when I was just starting out as a writer, and it was kind of a shame that she started developing dementia when I just started drafting my first book in 2018. So unfortunately, she was not able to see my creative work be completed, and she died in 2020. This is just a page acknowledging my thanks to the professors who have helped me over the years. Just going to show this off for a split time. Go ahead and pause it if you want. And the stuff doesn't really matter. One thing I will say is that I'm kind of upset with the table of contents. Because they scaled up the text size, the page numbers all messed up. Before I forget, if you want to read it yourself, all you have to do is just Google Chico State Scholar Works. First thing should be Merriam Library. Click that, hit visit Scholar Works, and as of right now, the top result is my project. But if you were seeing this video, this stream in the future, go ahead and search Zachary Bennett, and you can find it there. That being said, let's go ahead and get started in analyzing the my critical introduction. Before we get started, I am actually going to read the abstract. This project serves as an extract for book 2 of my novel series I refer to as the Dim Saga. Excuse me. I intended this project to serve as a standalone project, and while I do reference some events from the first book, those references are few. Throughout this course of this series, I will be making note of references and kind of giving context to what will happen in the first book, and I do actually think that some of those references may actually be dated, because my first book has actually changed quite a bit since I started drafting this story for my master's project. This project focuses on the fictitious conflict between Heaven's Hide Agency, or the higher investigations of demonic entities agency, and the demons of hell. It is heavily influenced by Judeo-Christian beliefs and focuses on a handful of characters in third-person omniscient point of view, following the views of multiple characters. The primary narrative focus of the novel is Hide Agent Alec Lowe working to investigate and take down a powerful organization within Heaven, known as a Primal Order, who seeks to create and control the apocalypse. However, there are some characters that have ulterior motives, which adds further conflict to the story. And the critical introduction emphasizes the importance of morally ambivalent characters throughout the project. It also emphasizes the major influence of the manga series One Piece in developing this project. I discuss the importance of symbolism, of the appropriation of biblical figures in story, and the way I'm handling the concept of good and evil in my portrayal of angels and demons. The critical introduction works to give contextual information for the project itself, but also labels some of the goals and projects of the characters going forward. So before we start the critical introduction, with that thing brought up, one thing I will say is further little preview before I get started on the thing. I do kind of cite some books. I do cite some scholarly articles. I will be discussing, kind of giving context to those articles and trying to give a little advertising to those books that I have read and that I have mentioned in this critical introduction. Dimfall of the Primal Order is the second part of a novel series I have been developing since 2018. It is heavily influenced by Judeo-Christian beliefs. Characters and creatures referenced in the Bible are fictionalized in my series. I take characters like God, the Archangel Michael, the Devil, Samael, etc., and add my own spin on these characters. This story focuses on the conflict between heaven and hell, but I'm doing something different with this conflict. There are television series like Supernatural and a handful of novels that depict angels as the good guys and the demons as bad guys. I'm choosing to do something different with my project. I want to create a scenario where the reader actively wonders whether the demons are truly bad by creating morally ambivalent characters. This was actually an idea, these concepts like good and evil and create morally ambivalent characters, something that it was kind of more so a recent addition to this project. When I first started writing this series, I had the idea of having my villains in particular just kind of be more morally gray. But I didn't actually go full on in depth into the morally ambivalent characters on both sides of the story until as a couple years into the development of my project. If you're wondering why I took from 2018 to 2020 to 2018 to 2024, I should say, to essentially finish the first draft of my first book and to write this extract of what will be book 2. I was always distracted with school. I've been in college since fall of 2014, and I've been completely distracted with schoolwork. Every single time I sit down and I write a section of my story, I just can never sit down and write for long because my mind is always going on to homework and projects. Now that I'm graduated, I was actually able to sit down and work on my project a little more frequently. So that's why that's why this is kind of a recent addition, because I didn't really sit down and actually finish my draft until didn't really sit down and kind of focus on this until after I was kind of developing this as part of my master's project. My story revolves around a fictitious organization called the Higher Investigation of Demonic Entities, or the Hide Agency. Think of them as the FBI of Heaven, but they work to protect humanity from the threat of demons while operating outside of humanity. I made this decision because when I drafted the concept of this series, I modeled it after our world. Due to this, I needed to find a reason why humanity is unaware of their existence despite the Hide Agency being active for about 2,000 years. The solution was to use advanced technology to keep the Hide Agency's actions hidden from the populace. So this is something that actually has changed a little bit. It's still somewhat modeled after our world, but it's not really meant to be taking place in our world. This is something that I kind of had to change apart. That's something I kind of changed when I was finishing up my development of book 1. Basically, how I want things to go going forward is to think of the story taking place here as well as in my novel project overall. Think of it as taking place in an alternate reality to our own. It has many similarities to our world, but it is meant to take place in a separate reality. I'm a huge fan of the physics theory, multiple worlds theory, which states that it is possible that there are an infinite number of parallel worlds that are similar but different to our own. I'm a huge fan of that theory. I think it's just so fascinating, and that's what I'm kind of basing off this story off of. It's similar. This world is meant to take place in a world similar to our own, but not exactly our own. And that's something that did kind of change as I started drafting this. And it actually kind of changed relatively recently. I think I added this this year. I kind of added that fact this year. It was just an idea that I had. It actually kind of spawned over my inspiration of developing the ending of the series. On the other side of the spectrum is the demons of hell, and I include a handful of different varieties or species. I take influence from mythologies of different cultures, and the reader can see this in the second Hefe section, where I introduce the character Bree, who is a skinwalker, a creature from Navajo folklore. I also took some liberties with some characters like Hefe himself and Abaddon. Before we get too far into this, I just want to say that I did kind of name drop some creatures that you won't be able to see, but it probably will be discussed further on. Hefe is sort of one of the main antagonists of the series. He essentially serves as a dual main antagonist, who shares a role with two other characters in the series. And the reason why he kind of shares a role is something happens to him that kind of has him be kind of pushed to the side, essentially. And and essentially he's really like the main antagonist of the first part, what will be the first part of this book. And then will be book 2, and then the second part will focus on another antagonist, and then the third part will focus on the last antagonist, and all the other antagonists will essentially be pushed aside to focus on the larger and greatest threat of this book. That's my original plan with this book 2. Bree is kind of like a side character. Is essentially like the assistant to Hefe. She's an information broker for Hefe. And she is a skinwalker, creature from Navajo folklore. And Abaddon is a creature from the Bible, essentially described as a knight of hell, if I remember correctly. He or she it's often like different sources kind of depict Abaddon as either male or female. In my story, he is male. So that's kind of like the background for those characters. There are many humanoid demons I have seen in mythology, like the succubus, a spirit often depicted as a woman who attempts to seduce men. A succubus is something that I used as an antagonist in my first book. Succubi and incubi in my story actually kind of has a different role. They are sex demons in real life. They essentially siphon off the life force of people they have sex with. Incubi are often depicted as male, succubi are often depicted as female. In my story, I changed their roles to be slightly more PG, I guess you could say. Succubi feeds off of the positive emotions of others, and incubi feeds off the negative emotions of others. That's how they change in my story. I kind of had to change it because I felt like that having a person just constantly just want to have sex with other people would kind of be too much for my story. I used Hefe to introduce a species of demon known as Neo-Hominidae, which was meant to refer to demons capable of walking amongst humanity. This concept of demons walking amongst humanity is something that I have kind of seen like a note of. There are like different interpretations of demons I've seen like through different forms of media, but the ones that I think is kind of fascinating are the depictions of demons that look human, that are not depicted as a horned or scaly or anything like that. They look human. And in my opinion, that's kind of the most intimidating form of demon, because you never really know whether or not someone can be trusted or whether or not they're really kind of using against you. That's one thing I kind of like about Supernatural as a series, is all the demons do look humanoid. They do look like humans. and really like the only tell was supernatural was when their eyes just changed to black or red or something, which I think is just fascinating. That's essentially one of my inspirations for developing hominidae as a species. In my research, I've noticed a lot of medieval literature depicting demons in a wide variety of ways. This is true. A lot of look up a lot of medieval literature and in history, like you can actually see like detailed descriptions of like demons like showing like a almost like monstrous kind of thing. They often show like red or blue skin or something like that. It's kind of like really kind of fascinating, but it's also kind of interesting that a lot of people just kind of a lot of people at the time kind of depict demons as nothing short of monsters. It was common in that area to show demons as either hairy or hairless, having a different pigment of skin, horns, and hooved feet. I wanted to model the character Abaddon's reference to the imagery of demons described in medieval literature. Abaddon comes up near the middle of the story. Like toward the middle of this project, he actually has a very important role in my story overall, but he's essentially, for those curious, I'm working towards becoming a writer for a video game company, and I do have an idea for a video game being made off of this series. But Abaddon is really kind of meant to be reserved for the antagonist of that video game that I want to make for this game, for this story. One question that I often ask is an obvious one. Since I use God as a character, why don't you use the character? That's a typo. Cannot believe I have a typo. Of Jesus Christ from the New Testament. The short answer is I don't want to overcomplicate the story by adding what might be interpreted as a different version of God. In Christian beliefs, Jesus is often described as either being the Son of God or God himself. In Jewish beliefs, Jesus is referred to as a prophet and not the Son of God. My character God is a complex fictional construction. He uses different personas to hide or run away from mistakes he made when he went under the name Jehovah. This has also kind of changed a little bit. Recently with my with development of my first book. While it's still true that he does use his personas, God essentially is probably my most interesting character in my series, mainly because he uses different personas for different things. But it's not so much that he is running away from the mistakes. He's still kind of doing that. But it's more like he's repressing his memories of the things he did as a mistake. It's kind of like the same thing as like an idea that I had recently was, to use an example, is like if you have a serial killer who's been like who's like take for example Dexter. I think in the series Dexter there was a couple points where he actually tried not to kill people and he actually tried to change, but he just couldn't resist the urge to kill. That's kind of like a more extreme example for this. Like it's not so much that God is resisting the urge to be Jehovah, it's more like he's repressing his former desires, his former character as Jehovah. And it's really kind of meant to be like a more questionable, thing, because it's not really meant to be described as healthy to kind of repress your emotions and kind of push down what you feel, what you think, throughout the course of a long period of time. This is something I actually kind of deal with in real life, where I was repressing my emotions, repressing like what I've been feeling over a mistake I made in the past, and that often kind of causes like a boil over effect, where at some point those emotions will resurface and I will lose control over my emotions. That's essentially what I'm trying to be depicted here. God spent like a thousand years kind of repressing his emotions, his thoughts, his old desires, and just trying to depict himself as a different person. But there are some times when his old persona does show up at outside of his control, and that's what I'm gonna try and like illustrate from this point going forward. That's one of the changes I made in book one that was not actually thought of in this when I was drafting this story. I felt that by adding Jesus into the story, it would affect the development of God as a character. The topic of Jesus is also controversial, and I felt if I made Jesus a character, there would be some people that would be offended by how I portray him, especially if I put him in unflattering positions. This is also kind of true, at least in my opinion. It's still think that is kind of relevant. So I think that's kind of true. Jesus is kind of like a interesting character, I guess you could say. He he is just most in Christian beliefs. He, as I said before, he is like the Son of God, but he is more so kind of enveloped by the theme of forgiveness. In the Bible, he is said to have died so that the sins of others could be forgiven. It's kind of like the main like belief for the Christian faith, and there's something I did kind of want to do within my story is trying to have my portrayal of God be more so reflective of the character of Jesus. And because there are some people that do kind of feel that Jesus and God are the same. There are some people that feel that Jesus and God are different. But for the most part, this is also something I kind of had the idea to change recently. God in my story is really meant to reflect the God or Jesus present in the New Testament, whereas Jehovah is meant to reflect what God was depicted as in the Old Testament. That is something that I kind of had the idea to change, and something I want to talk about going forward. That's kind of why I don't have the topic of Jesus as a character in my story, is because essentially God and Jesus are kind of serve a similar role as Jesus does in the Bible. I made the decision to focus on God and his character rather than to include everything referenced in the Bible. In the story, I utilize an omniscient third-person point of view. I don't want to limit myself to the perspective of one character. This is kind of true and kind of untrue. It's not so much that I didn't want to limit myself to the following perspective on characters. That's also kind of true, but I was mainly kind of wanting to kind of tell a larger story that I felt that focusing on one character wouldn't actually permit me to be able to tell. And part of the main goals for my novel project going forward, the 13-part series, is I want to like challenge myself with a different like literary strategy at throughout the development of this series. So the first book was just challenging my ability to write and develop multiple characters' point of views at the same time, and see if I can develop multiple characters at once. For book 2, that this story is a part of, I'm actually going to challenge myself to develop 2 characters who are essentially like inhabiting the same body, and I do kind of have like a point where I in part 2 where I will kind of show that off. I focus on morally ambivalent characters, and it is my hope that readers will constantly ask themselves whether a character is good or bad. Morally ambivalence is a concept that I empathize in both angels and demons in my story. Moral ambivalence means that the character is willing to see both sides of the conflict and is willing or capable of changing their ideologies behind it because of it. The funny thing about moral ambivalence is a term that I first heard my former instructor, Rob Davidson, also my former committee chair, Rob Davidson, and it was a concept I actually never heard before, and I was actually kind of confusing with moral ambiguity. But moral ambivalence is actually like a term that actually more accurately reflects my story. It just kind of took me a while to figure out that moral ambivalence and moral ambiguity are 2 different things, and that moral ambivalence is actually something that is more reflective of my story than moral ambiguity. This is emphasized within my characters Alec, Lowe, and Hefe. Alec, following his experience in the first books, begins to see demons not as the enemy for the first time, and in his interaction with Levi, he is unwilling to believe Levi is lost cause as he believed. Levi, or Levi Beckett as his full name, is really kind of meant to serve as probably my most powerful antagonist I will ever write. He is someone that is he is kind of designed after the idea of someone who is unwilling to take responsibility for their own actions. In his mind, it is always anyone else's fault but his own for anything bad that happens to him. and he is essentially kind of meant to be like a parallel of sorts, a parallel character of sorts to Alec Lowe, and it's really the dichotomy that I'm trying want to try and like illustrate between Alec Lowe and Levi Beckett is I kind of wanted to show like two sides of the same coin essentially, where they're very similar characters in a sense, but they're also like very different in terms of motivations and character traits. Alec questions the role of the Hyde Agency and begins to empathize with the demons for the first time in his life. Hefe, on the other hand, desires to be a leader worthy of respect. However, he is unable to gain respect because of a choice he made before the events of the story. Hefe understands the reason why he can't gain respect, but he keeps trying and is willing to change his character to better fit an effective leader. I was kind of disappointed when I was in my drafting of this story. I had a really powerful section at the end of this series that I actually had to, this project that I actually had to cut out because, and it would have actually kind of gave Hefe a little bit more of an interesting character, but due to the limitations of this project, I actually couldn't include it. And this is actually the first example of a quote from a book that I'm citing. Tommy Orange's There is a book essentially told from multiple perspectives that essentially focuses on Native American people. And it's actually a really good book that actually kind of leads up to like a very climactic moment. If you want to read a good fiction story and if you're interested in Native American culture, I highly encourage you to read Tommy Orange's There. It's actually a really good book. An example of moral ambivalence can be seen in Tommy Orange's There. Jackie Redfeather is recovering alcoholic, reeling from an assault when she was younger and from her struggles as a distant mother. She is introduced attending an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting when she sees a person, Harvey, who assaulted her when she was young. She sees Harvey as a villain, and when it comes time for her to speak, she directs the words of her troubled past towards Harvey. It is clear that she wants something to do with him. However, when Harvey approaches her and offers to make things right by taking her to Oakland to reconnect with her daughter, she has to change. Don't come with me then, that's fine. Don't even listen to me. You know what you want. You said it. You want to go back. Okay, Jackie said. Okay, Harvey said. Okay, you'll come back? I'll think about it. Jackie is portrayed as someone who blames Harvey for what went wrong in their life. However, she is willing to put that aside and trust him. When she first meets Harvey, the reader is led to believe that Jackie is never going to trust him or even want to talk to him. But this change within Jackie's character is an example of more ambivalence. Jackie is willing to change her ideals and trust a man who affected her when she was younger and who she blames for many of the things that went wrong in her life. So another thing I will say about the story is if you are interested in reading this book, Tommy Orange's There, uh, it does it shows the different varieties of Native Americans that can exist in North America. A lot of people, when they think of Native Americans, they often like imagine people probably would think that they would only like live on a reservation or something like that. But there's Native Americans that are kind of intersected in American society, like everywhere, and it's not just people that live in reservations that are Native Americans. And it's just this book kind of shows that there are average people who are native who have their own struggles and their own story, and that's what he does a good job like telling in this book. Another example of more ambivalence can be seen in Karen Russell's short story The Prospect, just found in her book Orange World. So Orange World is a book kind of focusing on the occult, telling stories focused on the occult. If you are interested in reading short stories focusing on the supernatural, then this book Orange World by Karen Russell, well, it may actually be a very interesting read for you. The characters Clara and Aubergine or Abby are thieves, but their motives are not to get rich, but rather to survive. They steal from the rich and pawn their plunder to earn a small profit that was enough to survive another couple months. This changes when they found themselves stuck in the memory of the past, a lodge filled with laborers who died in an avalanche several years earlier. Clara and Abi hope that they can find a way to profit from the ghostly laborers, but as the story progresses, conflict arises between them. They argue for the first time against stealing from the deceased laborers, with Abi not wanting to steal from them and Clara the opposite. The moment Abi looked into Clara's eyes, everything changes for her. I felt I'd become fluent in the language of eyes, and now I saw what she'd known all along, what she never once screamed at me. You used me. Every party you bait the hook and I dangle. I lit them, and what do I get? Some scrap metal. I'm sorry, Clara. Here, Abi sees for the first time how her actions have affected Clara, how Abi has been using Clara for her own purposes. Just by looking in Clara's eyes, Abi can tell how Clara feels about what they both were doing, and she feels remorse over her actions. By Abi acknowledging her mistake of her using Clara for personal gain, she begins to change because of it. Here, Abi is shown to be a morally ambivalent character because she is capable of changing her ideology based on information or events she experiences. I put more of an emphasis on moral ambivalence on my antagonist, however, I also try and do the same for my protagonist. It is important for me to always illustrate the gray area. I want people to see demons and angels in a different manner than we have in the past several centuries. I want people to question if a specific demon is good and if an angel is bad. By doing this, I hope to create a type of discourse among those who read my work of people debating which side is better in the same way that people debate on the light side and dark side of the Force in George Lucas's Star Wars. This is something that I still kind of would love to be able to experience today. I would love to be able to witness a sort of like exchange between two different people, kind of arguing like which side is the good side, like the Hyde Agency or the Demons of Hell. Like, there's an easy argument to say that because Hyde Agency is fighting to protect humanity, that they are the good guys. However, there is also an argument to say that the demons are the good guys and the Hyde Agency are the bad guys, and that's the type of thing that I want to try and illustrate within my story. By focusing on the points of view of multiple characters, I hope to make people pay attention to the more ambivalent nature of characters and to see them as complex characters in their portrayals and motivations, as well as seeing the complexities of the world at large. The last topic I will bring up with my project is my goals beyond the characters present within. Starting with the antagonists, there are two that I primarily focus on, Hefe and Levi Beckett. I am attempting to make my antagonist three-dimensional, where at the end of the story, the reader explores the question if they are right, wrong, or a mix of the two. Hefe is meant to serve as a tragic character. Before going further, I want to check something. Alright. Where was I? He is based on the concept of leader who does not command the respect of his peers and who struggles with the concept of leading. There are different layers behind his character that I'm trying to emphasize. The first is the importance of names to demons, where names must always be given to another as a symbolic form of power. This is an idea that I kind of had over the belief, a belief held by among superstitious people that if you know the names of a demon, you have power over them. That's not the case of how it works in this story, but it's how it's kind of the reason why I kind of had this idea of having names be important to demons. For someone like Hefe, he chose a name for himself without it being given to him by another demon to replace his given name, Dylan. This is a major taboo among demons, as names hold a kind of power to them that must be given from one form to another for the name to carry its weight. An example of this is when he encounters a soldier of God, a Hyde agent viewed as the strongest agent who works for God. So before I continue, this kind of references the first time this character was actually seen. The soldier of God reference here his name is Jean Michel Devereux. He is a French Templar, a former French Templar, and he will be the main character of my third trilogy. So about 6 books away from where this book will take place is when he will actually kind of have his own like trilogy dedicated to him. Viewed as the strongest agent who works for God, and Hefe speaks to a powerful demon. Hefe turned towards Abaddon and ordered, "Bring me that zealot's head." Abaddon growled his response, "I am not your pawn, Dylan." Here, Hefe tries to utilize his role as the leader by giving an order to a powerful demon, Abaddon, who dismissed his words and disrespected Hefe by using his original name. So this is like the first example, I guess you could say, of me just kind of showing like Hefe kind of struggling to And like when I get to that point where I kind of read that section to you guys, this will be the kind of first point where Hefe tries to uh be a leader, and he gives a command, and then someone just doesn't respect his command. A lot of people, they look to a leader for guidance and give orders and give instructions to how to complete a certain task or something. Hefe wants, desires more than anything to be a leader commanding of respect, to be able to tell someone, I need you to go do this, and they'll do it. To be able to lead them through like a harsh or difficult time, and to be actually respected in order to be doing that. And Hefe struggles at the course of this story with gaining that kind of respect. And he does kind of get it at the end, but it does come with a price. This emphasizes Hefe's main struggle in becoming a leader, as he frequently encounters figures who don't respect him or even listen to him. I try to contrast Hefe's role as a leader with that of Samael the Devil, who many in hell view as a true leader, but is unable to lead as he is imprisoned by the high agency. So throughout this course of this story through book 2, I am trying to show a little difference between how Samael served as a role leader and how Levi Beckett, how Hefe serves as a leader. And I'm trying to illustrate the difference throughout this course of the story. You actually kind of see like examples of what Samael is like in the story, but he views the demons of hell to be his family. He loves the demons. He wants to help the demons, and all the demons respect him and cherish him. But he kind of essentially was kind of arrested, I guess you could say, by the high agency, and Hefe was trying to force that role upon himself, but has been having difficulties. That's essentially the dichotomy I want to depict within Hefe and Samael. Samael is someone who people view as the true leader. Hefe is depicted as a fake leader. Hefe aspires to be like him, but always falls short. I say he's a tragic character because near the middle of the book, he is killed, just as he finally gains the following, which leads Levi Beckett to assume the role of the main antagonist. This is something that it may be a spoiler, I guess you could say, for book 2. But this is the price that I was mentioning before. He finally gets a following. He gets a bunch of people, like thousands of people, to be able to follow him, who respect him, and all this kind of stuff. And then he kind of has it taken away from him. This may be like a huge spoiler, but at this point when I was writing this, I had no idea like when I will be able to finish book 1, or when I will be able to even like start to write or even finish book 2. So I decided to include this, which may be a spoiler. This will actually pop up at the end of part 2 of book 2, but this may be a like very big spoiler. People may maybe want to read this in book 2 when it comes out, and will be aware that this happens that way. But Levi is based on the concept to someone who is unable to assume responsibility for his actions. He blames the character Alec Lowe for everything that went wrong in his life. In his eyes, it is Alec's fault he lost his job as a detective and was imprisoned. It is Alec's fault his family left him. It is Alec's fault he died, and it is Alec's fault he was sent to hell. Levi Beckett will never believe anything he did was wrong beyond getting some form of revenge on Alec Lowe. His primary goal is to reunite his family. So this is one example of something that I think is kind of similar between Alec Lowe and Levi Beckett. Their goals are very similar. The primary goal for Alec Lowe in this trilogy is to essentially reunite his family. His son was taken from his wife and him when his son died. He was never got to see his family or loved ones, and he was sent to heaven, essentially. Instead, he was abducted and was sent to purgatory to kind of follow the ambitions, of course, to follow the ambitions and the orders of the Primal Order. And then, surprise, surprise, the Primal Order fails and lost contact with him, and he something bad happened to him. He kind of got trapped there with no way of escaping. He follows Hefe because Hefe promised Levi that he would be able to see his family again. However, its characters also used to emphasize the difference between where Demos, dead humans sent to hell, and demons being born in hell. As emphasized by Hugo Winters, Redeemos are only called Redeemos so long as they still maintain the morals that define humanity. The power of darkness corrupts any and every individual exposed to it. The longer a human is exposed to the power of darkness, the more their concept of right and wrong diminishes until they have nothing to prevent them from saying no to the temptations darkness offers. So this is something that I'm actually kind of proud of. I'm actually kind of came up with this. The entire quote of this does kind of illustrate like the different difference between like Redeemos and demons, something that I could not really effectively do within book one. And basically the full context of this quote, without like the cut out bits as in here, it essentially states that there is really very little separating the Redeemos from a demon. Really, like the only thing that separates them is their morality. A demon would be more than willing to do bad things for bad reasons, whereas a Redeemos is someone that is often more so conflicted. Like they're willing to like do bad things, but they're also capable of like changing and capable of showing that they can do good as well. But the longer they are exposed to this power system of darkness, the longer that their will is corrupted. So another thing, I don't know if I brought this up, but there is a power system between my story, the power of light and darkness. Light is something that hide agents use. Darkness is something that demons or Redeemos use. They're essentially meant to be oil and water. They're both power systems are meant to be poison of the other. And the only difference is hide agents have professional training over light, and darkness is often kind of learned on the fly by Redeemos and demons. Near the end of the project, Hugo is proven right when Levi massacres a meeting filled with demons and kills a human woman that Alec Lowe, as a hide agent, is supposed to protect. He has no qualms about performing bad deeds. He will kill, lie, and steal. He will do anything that will enable him to reach his goal. He is motivated only by the desire to enact his revenge on Alec, whom he blames for everything that went wrong in his life. Secondary to that goal is for him to go into heaven, where he believes he belongs and reside with the family that left him. Levi's character is complex, and every now and then I like to have redeeming moments with my antagonist. Levi Beckett is the character I'm planning on redeeming. At the climax of the story, I am planning on having Alec cause Levi to admit he was wrong and tell him what he can do to be allowed back in heaven. Levi believes that faith is what allows people to go into heaven, and Levi was a Catholic when he was alive. By the end of the story, the truth of heaven and hell will be explained to Levi by Alec, which is that people are sent to heaven or hell based on their actions. A Redeemos like Levi can still be admitted in if he can show he has changed. I wanted to be able to emphasize this in my project, but due to length limitations, I was unable to. Ideally, I would have hinted at this from the internal thoughts of Hefe when thinking about what Levi and what would have been the final section of my project. So this is something that initially when I first started writing this, there was going to be about 4 or 5 additional sections to this project, 4 or 5 additional perspectives, but I had to cut like about a quarter, maybe two quarters something of it out because of limitations with this document. This a creative master's project is required by Chico State University, is required to be anywhere from 75 pages long to 100. The only reason why this is 104 pages long, as you can see up here, excuse me, is because they did change the font size of this document when they published it, so it kind of expanded the word size of this thing, which is another thing I kind of dislike about this. documents because they changed the font size. The table of contents is kind of misaligned. Onto the heroes or protagonists, Alec Lowe is set on the goal of reuniting his family by saving his son from purgatory. To do that, he must defeat the Primal Order, an organization based in heaven who was responsible for sending him there that's meant to be his son there. I show Alec Lowe as beginning to have doubts about the Hyde Agency based on the seed that is planted at the end of the first book. Admittedly, I had difficulties writing his character because he was outshone by characters like God and Levi Beckett, however I did find a solution. Alec has a character arc in the first book where he is proud of his abilities and thinks he is better than his peers. Then he is humbled when he realizes he is not as strong as he was led to believe. He then learns from a mentor figure what being a Hyde agent means to the agent, as his ideals are different for each person. He also is forced to realize that the Hyde Agency may not be as good as he had been led to believe, and he promises the main antagonist. So the main antagonist, I don't really name him here, but the main antagonist in book 1 is named Spade. Upon his defeat, that he will change how the Hyde Agency operates. The problem I had when writing out his character in this project is that people aren't familiar with the events of book 1, as initially, I was writing his character as someone who had already changed from previous events. This is kind of a bad habit to get into when you're writing a book in general. There are some stories that I've read by other writers, other amateur writers like myself, where they don't show a character growth, they don't show any sort of change within a character, and they essentially write their main character as essentially flawless. This is a really bad habit to get into. It just kind of makes the character like less interesting to the reader. And really kind of what makes a character strong and interesting to a reader is their character flaws and their struggles, and showing that they're not as perfect as you've been led to believe. It's kind of a bad habit to get into as a writer when you depict a character as being perfect. No character should be perfect. No character should be flawless. If you want to make an interesting character that people reading your book will be attached to, you need to include some flaws. You need to include some ways for your character to grow and change by the end of the story. When I first started writing this project, I made the mistake of writing Alec's character as if he was already changed. That is a very bad habit to get into, and why I was kind of struggling with getting his character right in developing this project. I revised the creative samples like a few times before I found something that worked. And as I will eventually discuss, I did find a solution to develop his character. And if you are a writer like me who is struggling with writing your own story, I highly encourage you to just try and figure out like what your character's flaws are, what your character's struggles are, and how they can resolve them, how they can improve upon them by the end of your story. That's how you make a very strong character in your story. Every character you write should have their own flaws. And it's just how the character overcomes their flaws that makes them a strong character. The solution I found was to further his growth from book 1 by having him struggle with what he had learned from book 1 and finding a way to fulfill his promise to his old adversary from that book. You see an example of this in the scene of Alec and Levi's first mission together. After they defeat a group of Redeemos running a church, Levi questions Alec if it bothers him that the Hyde Agency's prison was responsible for holding some demons and Redeemos for the past 1,500 years. Alec sighed. If you were asked me a couple months ago, I would say no. Now I'm not so sure. Beckett raised his eyebrows in interest. What changed? My last mission was eye-opening, and I made a promise I will try and change how the Hyde Agency operates, but I don't know how. I need to drink some Gatorade. It is really dry. The internal struggle that Alec is dealing with is why he is reluctant to take Hugo's warning about Levi Beckett seriously, until near the end of the project when he realizes his mistake. After what Alec experienced in book 1, he was no longer capable of seeing the roles of heaven and hell as black and white. He was beginning to see the gray area for the first time. The reason he was willing to work with Levi was because he didn't want to believe that Levi was still an evil person. Alec was placed in a blind spot because of his knowledge that the Hyde Agency is not solely in the right and the residents of Hell are not solely in the wrong. Alec is beginning to realize that there are good and bad individuals on both sides, and he is conflicted about how to think of it. This is something that I did kind of emphasize at the end of book one. Well, towards not at the end of book one, but towards the middle of part two of book one. Basically, heard something. Basically, I did have a moment where I literally spelled it out. That in every conflict, in every war, in every battle, are good people on both sides of the conflict. That may be controversial to even kind of suggest something like this. I do believe that it's possible that in World War II there were some German Nazis that may not have fully believed in the rhetoric that was pushed by Adolf Hitler and the leaders of the Nazi regime. I do believe it's possible that there are some former Nazi soldiers who would have had a change of heart and realized that they were wrong in following and pursuing Hitler's ambitions. And that's something that I do still believe today. Like, even though it's very controversial to kind of suggest something like that, I do think it could be possible that there are some people on that side of the conflict, that side of that very controversial and consequential conflict, that were able to see that what they were doing was bad. But they may not have had the courage to kind of change because of their fear of their leaders. It's not like a theory that I had that probably has no ground. The last major character I focus on is God, who is part of a group responsible for creating the universe. These people are largely responsible for perfecting the different aspects of life. Their lifespans have become limitless. They are immune to most diseases. However, they are not immortal. They can still be killed if their body took lethal damage, which you would see in book one. He has adopted a personality disorder that is meant to protect him from the memories of an event that took place 3 million years ago when he caught Samael experimenting on a primitive version of humanity meant to be based on the primate ancestor Australopithecus afarensis. His extreme reaction led to a rift within his people, prompting him to repress those memories and adopt a new persona. This is something that changed in book one. He did not create his personas 3 million years ago. He created his personas 1,000 years ago when Samael was arrested. So this is something that changed within book one to has developed this project. He has not had the persona of God for 3 million years. He had it for about 1,000 years. The other thing that I changed was did I say it here? Yeah, I just had it here. So I did mention that there was a rift within his people, and I think I emphasized that his people left 3 million years ago. I wanted to emphasize that also changed. Some of his people left 3 million years ago, but some stayed. But more people left after what happened 1,000 years ago, and people that remained in heaven are essentially 2, 3, 4 people at the beginning of book one that was still within heaven, and now there are 3 people at the beginning of book at the end of book one. Although one additional person was kind of introduced and brought back into heaven by the end of the book one, so it's back up to 4. This was brought into focus when his interaction with 2 of his compatriots, Raphael and Pravil. Raphael was introduced in book 2. He is someone that I was actually considering making him a character in my Symmetry Pet series. He is kind of an interesting character. And basically how the Aether works, in case I don't, the Aether or God's People works. I don't know if I explained it in this project, but basically, There are 6 individuals, the Aether and God is among them, that were in charge of investigating the different aspects of life, and 6 individuals that were in charge of protecting them from their old home environment. Proviel was researching creating dimensions or realities that are capable of sustaining life. Essentially, he is responsible for creating pocket dimensions that the agency utilizes for their own bases and stuff. Raphael is the protector of Proviel. He is not as technically as intelligent, I guess you could say, as Raphael. Is not as scientifically gifted, but he is strong. This was brought into focus when his interaction with 2 of his compatriots, Raphael and Proviel, led to his memories coming up again when they prodded him. The memories in question were the controversial way in which he handled the banishment of Samael, the devil from heaven, moments that created the rift itself. Memories of his past began to resurface, memories he tried to suppress. He remembered the scattered, disconnected pleas of his colleagues as he panicked. Are you just going to turn your back on him? Voice within God's mind spoke up. He was only doing what you asked. You told him that he needed to find a way to experiment this discovery, and you banished him for it. This is also something I want to change because it's something that I had with book 1. I did not have the idea of having the persona of Jehovah resurface until I started further developing book 1. And instead, what I end up doing is kind of depicting God as having a sort of like a PTSD over his mistakes of his past. And that's something I do kind of want to change. I do kind of want to revise when I'm developing this, when I'm revising this project and turning it into what will be book 2. To God, the human perception of God is meant to be flawless, an ideal leader, which is what God or Jehovah tried to emulate. The moment of God's memories breaking free is meant to lead to God ultimately accepting who he is in an effort for him to stop running from his past. Another facet of my writing is how I incorporate stories of the Bible. I made the creative decisions to treat the stories of the Bible as strictly symbolic in nature. An example is some elements of the creation stories are repurposed in the lore of my story. In the Bible, the universe is created in 7 days and nights. For my story, God caused an event that led to the creation of the universe. Billions of years went by, but to God it felt like 7 days. The only book of the Bible I will be referring to in designing my story is the book of Revelations, as the second trilogy will focus on preventing the apocalypse from happening. I plan on using each of the 4 horsemen in the narrative of the second trilogy, as well as a false prophet and even the beast referenced within it. Every other story reference in the Bible can be viewed as symbolic of an event that related to God and his people. The Aether who I reference in my project. I chose the name Aether from the root word ethereal, a variation of the word ethereal, which refers to the regions beyond Earth. The problem I have is the word Aether I feel is like Aesir, which is referencing representative gods from Scandinavian mythology. However, it works with what I'm trying to do. Finally, going on into chapter 2, important authors and theories. Charles Baxter's Burning Down the House is another book that is actually really good. If you are a writer, I highly encourage you to check out this book, Burning Down the House by Charles Baxter, as well as reading the book by Flannery O'Connor, Mysteries and Manners. It has a lot of theories that you could develop insight with in your own work. But Charles Baxter's Burning Down the House both draw some parallels to my work in some ways and influence in others. And one of the many passages I connected with Baxter states most young writers have this experience. They create characters who are imaginative projections of themselves minus the flaws. This is something that I was discussing earlier, that a lot of writers trying to depict characters as being flawless because they don't want their characters to be like themselves who are flawed. And that is kind of like a bad habit to get into when you're writing. They don't want these imaginative projections of themselves to make any mistakes. This quote was one of the first passages I connected with, as most of the characters in my book are meant to represent some aspects of myself. So what I mean by that is almost every single character in my book is meant to be similar to how I view myself. Like Alec is very prideful. He is proud of his abilities. He is also very compassionate, and he is also cherishes the concept of family. Those are all like attributes I believe in. God, for example, has probably the most like diverse and complex personality, and that's kind of like similar to what I believe. I do kind of have like a more complex personality than people may give me credit for when they're first talking to me. And to give like an additional example, a character that you will see later on in the story is named Elizabeth Hart, who is meant to be more quizzical in nature. And she is how she was depicted at the beginning of book one and what she is turning into, with her initially like questioning like the events around her, and also kind of having like a desire like at the end of book one of her wanting to essentially understand yourself is something that is kind of more similar to myself, kind of more similar to my motivations as a writer. At least my motivations from when I first started drafting the story, about like 2018. I actually kind of changed a lot since then, personally. This goes one of the first passages. The difference is I'm not afraid to include flaws, and some characters like Levi Beckett embody my flaws. As I stated earlier, Levi Beckett represents the idea of someone who always blamed everyone and everything else for his problems, which is something that I used to do when I was young. To use another example, my character Alec Lowe represents some aspects of me on two fronts. One is value of family, and the other is his pride. He is meant to be overtly proud of his abilities and who he is as a person, which can at times lead him to be arrogant in his worldview. I acknowledge the problem that Baxter presents early on in his book of craft essays, but the difference between my work and some other writer is I understand that flawless characters are uninteresting. I'm not afraid to incorporate flaws to make my characters more dynamic. In some areas of Charles Baxter's Burning Down the House, Baxter refers to heaven and hell, a topic to which I was drawn. He said, say what you will about it, hell is story friendly. If you want a compelling story, put your protagonist among the damned. The mechanisms of hell are nicely attuned to the mechanisms of narrative, not so the pleasures of paradise. I agree and disagree with this statement. If you are going for the version of heaven and hell presented in the Bible, then yes, it is true. If the Bible paradise represents a perfect society that serves as a reward for those that have lived good lives. What I disagree with is if the concept and hell were to be tweaked, both locations can be equally compelling. In some ways, both heaven and hell in my project are meant to be dystopic in some nature. With hell it's more obvious, but with heaven it is subtle. I portrayed hell as a fallen civilization, an environment lacking any form of leadership. One ideology dominates the landscape, Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest. With heaven, I portray it as a quote-unquote perfect world on the surface, but problems arise when you peel back the layers. In specific, the roles of the primal order and its grip on heaven, the role of the high agency plays in the story, and the views many prevalent characters have of the world at large. I agree with Baxter that if I portray heaven as it appears in the Bible, it wouldn't be as interesting, which is why I added layers to heaven society to make it more interesting and less perfect to the reader. So, to kind of get more clarification on this, I think depicting hell as sort of like a fallen civilization is something that I do kind of think is a strong point to that area, but it's not so much as a fallen civilization. It's like a area that has deteriorated when the leaders of hell was captured and imprisoned by the high agency. And with what I mean by heaven being dystopic, showing signs of a perfect world of being dystopic, actually dystopic, is really kind of meant to be like a surface level. On the surface, it looks like a perfect world, but it does have its problems when you peel back the layers, as I said before. But I kind of show this in the dichotomy between the Hyde agency and how some people within the agency do kind of have like a more how do I say it, like some people are unwilling to see the world as anything other than demons bad, Hyde agency good. Some people within the Hyde agency are just so blinded by the concept that they are the good guys they fail to acknowledge that the people that they are fighting, the Redeemers or demons, may not be as bad as they are led to believe. And instead of seeing the larger picture, they are willing to kill or capture those that do something minorly wrong, just for the sake of saying that they are doing it for the good of humanity. It is something that I want to really emphasize in the second trilogy when I focus on the second protagonist, Charlotte Matthews. Charlotte Matthews, to discuss it a little bit further, she is someone who is wanting, what she desires most of all is to be accepted by her peers and her family. She is essentially kind of viewed as the outcast. A lot of the Hyde agents kind of despise her because of how reckless and uh, what I'm looking for, abrasive she is. And but they like her friends that she always spends time with. So I am planning on just kind of showing how some Hyde agents are just kind of like the bad apples in the thing, while some Hyde agents are really good for the group, and they're actually able to kind of see differences and see the good in the people that they are presumably supposed to fight, which is the demons and Redeemos. And that's kind of like what I mean. Like, it's kind of like a both of the two services, both in the Hyde Agency and in some areas of heaven, that is kind of meant to be dystopic in nature. Flannery O'Connor's Mystery and Manners, another book that I recommend if you are a writer and struggling to kind of gain some insight into the field of writing. Really good book. Make some connection with writers that I linked to my own writing. She states, I'm gonna check something because I think that's a typo. Oh, okay. I thought that Flannery O'Connor was a guy. I thought that was a typo. She states the country that the writer is concerned with in the most objective way is, of course, the region that most immediately surrounds him, or simply the country with his body of manners that he knows well enough to employ. This quote essentially implies that the writer is often influenced by their environment. I agree with that idea. One thing that I've heard people assume is that because I'm writing a story inspired by Judeo-Christian beliefs, I must be religious myself. I was Christian earlier in my life, but I left my religion for a handful of reasons. However, I was always drawn to the mythologies of different cultures. I grew up studying Greek and Egyptian mythologies as polytheistic religions interested me, but the concept of heaven and hell, angels and demons interested me as well. I'm drafting this story not because of my personal ideological beliefs, but because of my fascination with mythology. The environment that Flannery O'Connor suggested influenced me, in short, was an educational environment. Flannery O'Connor also discusses the impact symbols have on the reader. O'Connor states the mind is led on by what it sees into the greater depths that the book symbols naturally suggest. This is what is meant when critics say that a novel operates on several levels. The truer the symbol, the deeper it leads you, the more it opens up. How O'Connor discusses symbols in literature is fascinating to me, as it discusses how it leads the reader to be more engaged and to draw more connections to the world than they are reading. To Flannery O'Connor, symbols work to add layers to a given work by making the story more complex than how it appears on the surface. This connects to how I utilize symbolism in my story as seen within a few characters. I utilize a concept that I refer to as dual symbolism, where I have similar scenes that represent different things. An example of this is seen in the halfway section on page 61-66. Again, this is inaccurate because of the fact that they changed the font size in this project, was to kind of screw up the page order. But it's around this page number. On page 61, Hefe's works relive the moment he was born in hell. First encounters Samael, the former leader of hell, who gives Hefe the name Dylan. Shortly out later, on page 66, Hefe witnesses a demon being born in hell, literally climbing out from underground, fully grown, asking for a name, and Hefe is unable to give one. The first scene is meant to be representative of what a leader is supposed to be. The second scene is meant to show that Hefe lacks those leadership qualities. I use dual symbolism a few times in my story, and I use it to emphasize different things to the reader. Dual symbolism is a term that I have crafted when I was developing this project. It is something that I like to do in my writing in general. I just didn't really have a name for it until I started developing this. To kind of explain a little bit more what I mean by that is you have two scenes that are similar in nature, but are meant to emphasize different things. And that's essentially what dual symbolism means. It's kind of meant to kind of show the differences between characters or difference in environment that is kind of is different, like depending on who is experiencing it, essentially. And on to the final thing, Chapter 3, Consideration, Literary Landscape. A large part of my literary project was influenced by the manga series One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. Trying to get kind of a stuffy nose. I discovered that series when I was at the lowest point of my life. After I caught up with the series a couple months later, I had a dream that laid the foundation behind my novel project. However, most of the elements present within my novel series were influenced by the concepts by One Piece. One Piece had been in development since 1997, and a couple of years ago, the writer hinted at the concept of the series coming to an end within the next 5 years. Before I go any further, what I mean by I discovered the series when I was at the lowest point in my life, I have had a history of suicidal ideations, beginning when I was a freshman in high school and ending when I was a freshman in college. It was essentially inspired or brought up, I guess you could say, because of a mistake that I made in the past, mistake that I blamed myself for pretty much my entire life, that I didn't actually begin to gain closure until the end of my time at grad school when I actually got to learn the truth of it. At the time when I just got back from a psych ward after my last suicide attempt and when I was a freshman in college, I knew I needed to find something to just kind of anchor my mind to. I needed to find like an anime or a movie or a book series to just try and like get my mind attached to something to distract me from the negative thoughts I was experiencing at the time. And that medium I experienced with One Piece. One Piece as a story fascinates me, and I do consider Eiichiro Oda to be quite possibly one of the best writers I've ever seen. Better than any novel and any author that I've seen or written any fiction novels or non-fiction novels. He is quite honestly like fascinating as a writer. One Piece has really strong character moments. It has a really fascinating story that has a lot of layers. And quite possibly the biggest influence of the series is kind of how they handle the antagonists of the series, where they kind of showed, oftentimes they kind of show different layers behind the antagonist, where they're meant to be shown that they're not, that the reason why they are doing like heinous or evil things is because of something that happened to them in their past that kind of influence or shape them into who they are. And in some ways, whenever Eiichiro Oda shows that off, they end up becoming more sympathetic to the reader because of it. Case in point is Senior Pink. Look up the backstory for Senior Pink on YouTube or on the internet, and you will see what I mean about like a antagonist kind of having a more sympathetic reaction to the reader. Senior Pink's backstory is such an emotional moment, but it's such like a great series. And one thing I will say is, One Piece has 1,067, 66 chapters as of right now, about like 1,020, 1,000 something manga anime episodes. They are in the process of making a new anime for Netflix only, where they're gonna essentially kind of cut back, essentially cut out all the filler, introducing the Toei anime. And when they do that, it may actually be more enjoyable to watch than the Toei anime. One major problem I have with the Toei animations anime of One Piece is they are willing to draw out fight scenes, and they're willing to just include like filler episodes to kind of extend the runtime of the episodes and make sure that they're able to make it to the episode limit. That's just kind of scummy in my opinion. But that's kind of my problem with the Toei anime, and one reason why I'm kind of happy, kind of excited about the remake of the One Piece anime that's going to be released on Netflix. One Piece developed. Now, Ichiro Oda has made statements like that before. However, considering the series is heading into its final story arcs, it may be true to that statement. This was written prior, like near the beginning, maybe even before the beginning of the Egghead arc when it started. It maybe it had just started actually in the manga, but that's essentially when this line was written. If so, when One Piece reaches its conclusion, I'm hoping that my project will be what some fans go to when their beloved series concludes. This is a really ambitious idea I have, but I do kind of think that there are some things that my story does that is very similar to what One Piece does well. So I do not think that it's entirely possible that people who are a fan of the One Piece manga or anime are willing to just kind of pick up my book and read it. But I hope that one day they can actually see what I'm trying to do with my own novel project and actually kind of see the connections I made to the series, and we'll be able to kind of get an appreciation of how the story has affected me, how that One Piece has affected me just as it has affected them. The issue with this is the difference form between the graphic novel and a novel. I'm trying to compensate for that by drawing similarities with how a manga is designed with how my novel is created. The main similarity is the content of story arcs present within mangas. In manga, there are two types of story present within its structures: arcs and sagas. An arc is a separate, often isolated story that connects to a larger story. Often, a given arc is connected to a handful of other similar arcs that follow a larger story. That larger story is often referred to as a saga, which is comprised of a handful of smaller arcs that work to tell a larger and connected story. Use an example from One Piece, the first saga is referred to as the East Blue Saga, which marks the beginning of the protagonist's journey that is comprised of 6 smaller arcs that work to tell a larger but connected story. I'm trying to do the same similar thing, but in novel form, where each book is separated into 3 parts that focus on an isolated but connected story. The example of for example, for example, the story this project is connected to belongs to the part that I will label as the fall of Alec Lowe. What follows is the fall of the Primal Order and the rise of Alec Lowe. Initially, in the early phase of my novel project, it was going to be a series of novellas spanning 11 chapters each. If I were to go that route, instead of 9 novels total, there would be 27 novellas. I decided to drop that format to focus more on telling a larger story. I kept a part of the novella plan by using the titles of them to refer to the titles of the different parts of the novel. The 3 parts of my novel resembles an arc in a manga, whereas the novel itself represents a saga. This is one of the main similarities between my novel project and the manga. There are many genres of manga that are present in Japan, but the manga genre I am trying to emulate is what is called a battle manga. Battle mangas are directed to a large, young adult audience and often shows imagery of bloodshed and gore. There's often a power system in place, but what drives the story forward is the characters and how they interact with the world. The villains are often memorable, and the protagonists often have goals that motivate them in life. The structure is another example of something I'm trying to do with my story. I use a power system of light and darkness, which is meant to parallel the concept of yin and yang, the Chinese philosophy, symbolizing the relationship of good and evil. My story details violence and bloodshed, and I'm not afraid of showing it. I'm also trying to make my villains memorable, and I feel I succeeded with my depiction of Taffy and Levi Beckett. However, the one thing I'm doing that I'm most proud of is the fact that every major character has a goal he or she follows, even the antagonist. Alec Lowe wants to rescue his son, Levi Beckett wants to go to heaven and be with his family. Hefe wants to become a leader worthy of respect and to rescue Samael from his confinement. God is someone whose story will be told across the 9 book. This is old information. It's not going to be a 13-book series, but his goal is to come to terms with his past. These goals drive my characters through their actions, and is yet another similarity between my literary project and a manga series. I'm hoping the similarities I have with my project and about a manga will be enough to engage with an audience that would read that style of story. However, only time will tell. In some ways, the project is meant to serve as a love letter to One Piece, as that story encouraged me to switch majors at Butte College and to pursue the career of a writer. If I hadn't discovered that series, it is entirely possible I would be a firefighter today, working in a job and environment I am not happy about. I wouldn't be here working on a project for a master's degree. Now I am working as a writer. It's entirely possible that this project wouldn't have existed in the first place. Everything I accomplished here today, since I pursued the path of a writer, I attribute to my discovery of One Piece for giving me the boost I needed to pursue my own ambitions. I use the term battle manga, which may be confusing to some about what that is. There are three different types of manga focusing on different themes with audiences with different subsets that fall under it. The three types of manga referred to as boys manga, girls manga, and ladies manga. Ladies manga in particular are more adult in nature, while boys manga and girls manga are written to cater towards a specific type of audience using themes and repeated concepts that appeal to that audience. Battle mangas are a subset of the boys manga, and some of the popular series that fall under this category are Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece, all series that I have experienced. These manga often have many of their chapters published in the magazine Shonen Jump. In relation to the boys manga, Shonen Jump itself, shorts say, so this is actually the first time that I'm quoting a scholarly source. Manga series such as Shonen Jump appeals to boys and men by stressing values such as friendship, perseverance, and winning. These values are among some of the most common themes seen in many battle manga like One Piece, and in some ways those themes work to inspire youth like it has inspired me to pursue their ambitions. So, to kind of get more context in this, I think I kind of use this guy as a source another time after this, but it's kind of in a longer article, scholarly article, analyzing the role manga has in its connection with these literary story, fiction story. So to continue, there's one final thing about boys manga and battle manga as a whole is there are a plethora of female fans of this series as well, so it does not entirely have a male audience. In contrast to what is known as girls manga, girls and ladies, manga is catered to a different audience and contains different content than boys manga. Short this, I do kind of use this later on. Much as in the past, it is girls manga dabble in love and romance. However, similar to boys manga, they often pit a young female protagonist in position of self-empowerment. George also notices the differences in girls manga written in the past, which often focuses on themes of domesticity and servitude, which is a stark comparison to what it is today. By focusing on themes of self-empowerment, it serves to be more relatable to adolescent women today. In relation to ladies manga, short states, as a type of feminist discourse, ladies manga attempt to address the experiences, desires, and needs of women to present role models for the modern Japanese woman. This is he kind of quoted another source here, so it's just me citing the source that he quoted. Roditsu Komiko, ladies manga, tend to focus on the reality of life experienced by the modern Japanese woman, whether she is a housewife, office worker, or college student. I should have put a period after that. That's a typo. Focusing on more mature content, ladies manga starts to represent the everyday struggles of an adult Japanese woman. Women. Girls manga and ladies manga, despite being different to boys manga, seek the same reaction to relate or resonate with their target audience. In relation to my marketing of projects, I plan on using my YouTube and Twitch channel, to advertise and market my books. I plan to create videos to citing my creative work, and I hope by doing this it will increase the sale of my novels. It is something that hasn't really been done by too many writers. I have heard of a writer using her TikTok account to discuss her own works, but I haven't heard of some more famous writers that done something like this. This could be a new thing that the next generation of writers will do, and I'm hoping as I market and advertise my novel project, I will also grow my audience in the process. I have another series coming up. To oh god, a lot of dust in the air. Trying to expand on this, this was an idea that I had. I wanted to do essentially until I started this channel. Oh god, dang my nose. Ah. When I started my channel in 2020, I actually kind of wanted to use this channel as a platform to discuss and analyze my work, and this is the first time I'm actually going to be doing that. As of right now, I'm basically just going to be doing 4 streams analyzing this critical introduction with this master's project. The next 3 streams will be discussing my creative work. But God, I'm gonna sneeze. Ugh. But when my first book is published, I will be discussing and analyzing my creative work in more detail, and it's actually going to be focusing on certain topics like themes and character development, that type of thing. So it will actually be more helpful to people who are trying to make it as a writer, and they won't be able to kind of hear some of my own advice for writing and for how to write certain things in general. So I'm going to be covering a wide variety of topics when my first book is published. Some of it is related to my book. Some of it is going to be related to the topic of writing. So it may be helpful to people who are writers themselves. It may be interesting people who are interested in the field of writing. But that's essentially what this project is going to be going for. This reason why I'm streaming this right now, the reason why that I am reading my critical introduction, which has just been very word heavy, is because I want to just kind of be the first to advertise this project that I'm very passionate about, and also kind of get my own thoughts in the development of this project, and get my own thoughts on the character writing and the development, what I think works and doesn't work, what I'm proud of, what I was trying to convey in the writing of the story, that type of thing. This might be kind of interesting for people to read, to listen to and read, but to kind of hear my own thoughts of, but that's why I'm working on this right now, is because something I want to do since I created my YouTube and Twitch channel in 2020 and 2021 for YouTube is simply because of the fact that I want to just kind of use this as a platform to discuss my own creative work and discuss my writing strategies to people who may be interested in the field of writing. And thinking about publishers that will consider my project for publication, I'm thinking of publishers that publish both graphic novels and novels catering towards an adult audience. I found the publisher Quirk Books, based in Philadelphia, that would be a good choice for consideration. They cater towards both a child and adult audience, and they publish both graphic novels and novels. They published a book called The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This book is a New York Times bestseller and was a finalist for a Goodreads Choice Award. This book focuses on a similar genre to my story, which means that they may consider my book for publication. They request that authors submit their sample material to a submission inbox and thereby query one of their editors. Another publisher I would consider is Tor Publishing Group, as they focus on the fantasy genre that my novel focuses on. They're responsible for publishing the novel The Sandymancer by David Edison, which focuses on the use of magic references gods in the story. This is like my use of light and darkness as a power system and the representation of the biblical God in my story. I'm not an award-winning author. The award-winning novel, the content and genre tell me that they will consider my project for publication. The process for publication of this company requires you to go through an agent. It requires a full manuscript and cover letter for consideration. There's one other option that is available to me specifically because of my being on the autism spectrum, and that is the Autism Asperger Publishing Company, AAPC. It specializes in publishing book and multimedia by people who are on the spectrum. I'm struggling to get a publisher to accept my project, and this company could be a good option. I'm hesitant on if I'm willing to submit my work to this company. I do not consider myself to be an autistic writer, but a writer with autism. It may not seem like much of a difference, but the distinction means everything to me. For most of my childhood, I had behavior issues that I blamed on my autism. In elementary school, I was suspended a total of 56 times because of my behavior. When I finally started to gain control of my autism and my behavior in sophomore year in high school, I decided I didn't want to rely on my differences as a crutch for my entire life. Everything I accomplished today, I accomplished because of my own individual talents, and not because of some advantage due to my autism. I will not be entirely opposed to the concept of publishing my work through the AAPC, but it would only be when I have exhausted every other avenue. I want to be able to utilize the same opportunities and resources available to every other writer, rather than to use one available to only a certain group. At the end of the day, it may not be up to me who publishes my project, it will be up to those who are willing to accept it. Knowing who my audience is and what the genre is helps to narrow down my options for publishing. However, knowing the literary landscape helps me to understand what I would need to work towards. My project is ambitious, however, it is something I'm passionate and proud of. I feel there are a lot of possibilities of directions this project can go, and I have ideas of what I want to do with this series as it develops. The fact that everyone who has read this work has wanted to read and know more about its world and characters reaffirms the belief that this series has a chance to be successful and to resonate with those who read my work. My project is in the air and it's up to me to make sure it sticks landing. So that actually does it for the critical introduction. If there's one final thing I will say about the ending of that project, that critical introduction is have a pop up now. I actually don't like that, so we're gonna go back to this. I was gonna go to Twitch, but I forgot that I had the screen share. That is something that you would need to consider when you are writing a book. You really need to consider like the different types of publishing companies that are out there. You are likely not going to get published within the first book you write. Within the first publisher you go to, I should say. It's really bad misspeaking. If you write a book and you go to a publisher, they're probably not going to say no immediately unless it's written really well and they're really impressed with it. I believe it was stated that J.K. Rowling kind of took her first Harry Potter book like 15 different publishers before she found one to say yes. Do not be discouraged if you take your manuscript to a publisher and they say no, that they won't publish it. The worst they can say is no. Keep on working on your book, keep on making subtle changes and taking it to different publishers, and eventually you'll find someone who says yes. And an alert on my phone while getting prescriptions ready. The other thing I will say is when you are publishing or trying to publish your own story, you need to look into the different publishing companies and the type of work they publish. If you are like me, writing a fiction story focusing on the supernatural, essentially, trying to publish it in a publisher that publishes nonfiction books may not be a good fit for you. You're probably not going to have it published. You're probably not going to be able to publish a fiction fantasy story in a nonfiction publisher because it's not the type of medium they really publish. Every publisher has their own like fields and their own stories that they generally publish. And they usually have the type of work they're looking for in the about page of their website. Do your research into the different publishers that are available. Try and figure out what publisher you think would be a good fit for you, knowing what the content of your story is. And try and follow the guidelines I have for publishing your story. If they want a sample of your work, like a first couple chapters, make sure the chapters you send to them is the best possible version it could be. The last thing you want is to submit like chapters that have a couple typos in them or may not be as strong as other characters you have written, as other chapters you have written. So an example is within my first book, which I don't really have a copy of here on this computer, the first 3 chapters of my story is actually not as strong. The first 2 chapters are actually kind of strong in my story, but the 3rd chapter is just kind of like really slow paced. And if I were to give an option, I would actually not take my 3rd chapter, but instead take my 5th chapter, which kind of is when the story really kind of gets going. So that's something that I would kind of want to do if I do kind of counter a publisher that requires like a sample of your work rather than a whole manuscript. However, there are some publishers, as I mentioned here, that require you to go through with an agent, which is maybe a kind of expensive thing to do. There are also some publishers that may be that may require you to submit your entire manuscript, or and some publishers that will require you to submit a cover letter. do your best on that. Make sure that everything is proofread, is that what you're submitting is the best possible thing it could be, and just hope that they will say yes. But again, like even if a publisher says no, that's the worst thing they can say. You can always just take your manuscript back, make a few tweaks and edits if you feel it's necessary, and submit it when you to a different publisher when you are ready. I don't know if publishers will give you their problems with this story, but if they give you their critiques, they have some things that if they have some things that are generally good criticism for your story, like if they say, "Oh, your character could be stronger if you did this," or your story could be better if you made this decision. When I first started my time in my first time in Chico State, when I first started taking creative writing classes, I heard criticism like that, and it was so easy for me to dismiss it, thinking that my classmates are wrong and I am right, that they don't understand my stance as a writer, they don't understand what I was trying to convey as a writer. That's generally like a bad habit to get into. No writer is perfect, no story is perfect, every story has their problems. If someone has a criticism for your writing, it's okay to disagree with them, but you also need to acknowledge that there could be some things that you could change within your story that would improve your story. So if you submit your project to a publisher and they say no, and if they offer their own criticism for it, take a moment and decide whether or not their criticism have weight, whether or not it's not like something like completely hateful or whatever, and determine like whether or not the criticism they give to you will actually be beneficial towards improving your story in some way, and make the changes as you see fit. That's essentially how you would take criticism. It's not stop Walgreens. Is criticism is not really like a bad. It's not always like a bad thing. Constructive criticism is really what develops a story when as a writer. So that's one of the final thing I will say about revising when you're trying to publish. If you are remotely interested in what you see today, stop. God, stop texting me. I will be streaming. I will be going over the first part of not really the first part, but the second part of this project. Where I'm going to be reading the first three. Obviously, I think it's gonna go to 5. I'm going to be reading the first couple of sections of the table of contents. So I'm going to be reading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to be reading the Hefe section all the way up to God. And I think we will we'll be reading from Hefe to God. Or maybe like Hefe to Michael, because it looks like that God is the kind of a short section. Gonna be reading from Hefe to Michael next Thursday, 1 p.m. to 3 Pacific Standard Time. Is gonna be under the just chatting section of Twitch, and I'm basically going to be more so discussing and analyzing my creative work. This is actually the creative writing sample. It's not going to be like a text-heavy, jargon-heavy critical introduction. Not next week, but the week following, we'll be reading Out of Glow, Elizabeth Hart, and Hefe again. And the following week, we'll be reading Michael, Alec, and God. And that will be the conclusion of this project. Once again, just to kind of cover my bases, because of the fact that this project does have a publication warning, no portion of this project may be reprinted or reproduced in any manner unacceptable. Usual copyright restrictions without the permission of the author. I am the author. I give myself complete permission to analyze this. So if you are watching this, if you work at Twitch, if you work at YouTube, and you're seeing this video, once again, I said at the beginning of this stream, and I'm saying at the end right now, I am the author, and I give myself full permission to to discuss this project. I will be streaming Sims 3 Pets to 1% completion on Fridays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be streaming Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories on Saturdays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. And I'm going to be streaming Assassin's Creed Syndicate for 1% completion on Sundays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time.